page 123, and we are talking about biogeochemical cycles. Before we even get started with the notes, let's break this word down. Remember, bio means life, and geo means earth. So we're talking about chemicals on earth that are important to life. But we're also looking at how they move in cycles. So you probably know the word recycle, which means to reuse. So we're going to see that some of the important chemicals on Earth, like water. Let's remember that water can also be written H2O. So it's a molecule, 3 atoms, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. It becomes this water molecule. And so we just want to take a second and think about why water is important. Remember, water is needed for photosynthesis. So that's one of the important reasons why we need water. And so what we're looking about in the biogeochemical cycle is how does water cycle, but also keeping in mind why we need water.
So water is going to enter the ecosystem through precipitation, like rain, sleet, snow, or infiltration, meaning it's moving through the ground into the groundwater, and eventually getting to our lakes and streams. Water is going to exit through evaporation or transpiration, which means through the leaves of plants.
Yeah, so just a quick reminder that when we look at the stomata, remember the stomata is the opening in the plant leaf. The stomata will lose water. So the water cycle is important to plants. It's also important to animals. Remember, you dissolve your waste in water. That's why you need to drink water. And so it's needed for plants, it's needed for animals, and we're going to see this cycle that really depends on this other abiotic factor. So you don't have this picture in your notes, but keep in mind the precipitation is going to have to do with the temperature, has to do with how much warmth is coming from the sun.
So our next cycle is the carbon cycle, and the carbon cycle is powered by respiration and photosynthesis, and humans are going to influence this cycle by burning those fossil fuels.
So again, let's take some time to think about why carbon is so important. Keep in mind, carbon is what life on Earth is based out of. So all molecules, all organic molecules specifically, like C, H, and O, need carbon. So when we build proteins, carbs, lipids, and nucleic acids, we need carbon. That's going to be the backbone of all of those molecules. And so when we look at how it cycles, it turns out that the cycle is mainly powered by respiration. We do really want to make a note that all living organisms perform respiration. So when you look at this table that you have, you see cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is being done by decomposers. It's being done by plants. It's being done by higher level consumers and primary consumers. All living things, from animals and plants to bacteria, are going to perform cellular respiration. And what we want to put in is that cellular respiration releases CO2. That carbon was in a carbohydrate. We broke down the carbohydrate and we released CO2 as waste. Versus photosynthesis.
And then in photosynthesis, our plants are going to take in that carbon dioxide and convert it into
into our carbohydrate.
And then eventually our plants can, or our animals, our consumers can reuse that and then continue in that cycle.
So this is the main part of the cycle, is that respiration releases CO2, mainly from a carbohydrate, and photosynthesis will take in or remove CO2 from the atmosphere, so taking the gas in from the atmosphere, building the plant body, building a carbohydrate that's part of the plant body. Like Ms. Long said, the animal will eat the plant, the animal will break down the carbs and release it. And this is the main cycle But we do want to notice that burning fossil fuels has a big impact on this. Fossil fuels are actually from dead plants. Wood, coal, oil, that's actually all really, really old, compressed, pressurized dead plants. And so there's carbon there. And when we burn a fossil fuel like oil or gas, then we're releasing that CO2. Now keep in mind, although fires have been on Earth for forever, the amount of burning of fossil fuels that is happening now is definitely higher than it's ever been before, because humans are burning fossil fuels. And so what you need to know about the carbon cycle is this idea about how it's connected to photosynthesis and respiration.
Then we have our oxygen cycle, and in the oxygen cycle, remember one of the main reasons why we need oxygen is to perform respiration and to be able to convert our glucose, our carbohydrate, into energy for our cells, ATP.
So let's add that in. That's really important. Needed to perform respiration to get energy. Except we also know where oxygen comes from. So oxygen is released after photosynthesis. And that photosynthesis could be done by something like a tree, a plant, but it can also be done by protists or even by some bacteria.
So the oxygen cycle is going to be driven by photosynthesis, so that's going to produce or release the oxygen into our atmosphere. This actually led to the development of our ozone layer into today's atmosphere. We know that oxygen is consumed through respiration and through decay.
And so one of the themes that we keep seeing is this idea of a cycle. It's produced and then it's used. It's produced and then it's used. And so it is really important that we're able to balance the cycle. If we have too much being used and not enough being produced, then we end up to start to have some problems in our ecosystem. Now, just one quick reminder, if we're talking about biogeochemical cycles, carbon, oxygen, water, these aren't living. So these are abiotic factors.
Then we have our nitrogen cycle. With the nitrogen cycle, bacteria are actually responsible for converting nitrogen gas into a usable form. So when nitrogen's in the air, our bodies actually can't break that down and use them to eventually make the proteins that we need.
Yes, so let's add in there that what we're really talking about is the usable form is proteins and nucleic acids. Both of those have nitrogen in it. Carbs don't, lipids don't, but in order to build DNA, in order to build proteins, we have to have nitrogen. And the N2 that's in the atmosphere, we don't have any enzymes that can grab that.
So then we also have some nitrogen fixating bacteria. And nitrogen fixation means that the bacteria are actually going to convert the N2, the gas, nitrogen gas, into those usable forms, like NH3 ammonia or NO3, which is nitrate.
And so we've talked a lot during the year about how bacteria can be harmful and can cause diseases, but this is actually an example of where bacteria are beneficial. And so sometimes they'll live in the roots of plants, and they'll actually help the plant grow by fixing this nitrogen. Now, nitrogen is going to be something that we're going to talk about later that we'll call a limiting factor. And I bet you can kind of imagine what that means. It limits how much you can grow. So if there's not enough nitrogen, then the plant actually can't grow, and the animal can't eat the plant.
And continue with the cycle part of this. So after some bacteria actually convert it into the nitrate or into nitrate, they can actually convert it back to that N2 gas. And so the importance of the nitrogen cycle is that it's essential for all living organisms so that we can build those proteins and, like Ms. Lindsay said, and our nucleic acid.
One quick thing to add is that sometimes people will put nitrogen in fertilizers. And sometimes that fertilizer, when it's sprayed on the grass, will help the grass grow, but if that fertilizer runs off into an aquatic environment, like a lake or a pond, then it can help the algae grow. But sometimes too much algae means that the rest of the pond is going to be damaged. So we do want to be careful about how much nitrogen we have. We want to be careful of the cycle idea. And so this is the end of the biogeochemical cycles. We'd like for you to work in the summary box on page 124. Pick 2 new vocabulary words to define. So maybe you want to pick transpiration. Or maybe you really want to go back and pick photosynthesis and respiration, because they turned up a lot during this section. And then you need to copy this and finish this sentence. So make sure that you pause it here. This is not the end. This is part of your notes as well. So please make sure that you copy this and at least give it a try, as well as identify the 2 words you feel are going to give you the most trouble.